Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be kicking off the fantasy football edition of my podcast. I feel like deep down we all hate fantasy football, but we keep coming back for some odd reason. Whenever I talk about fantasy football on my channel, I'm going to be talking about standard PPR scoring formatted leagues in redraft settings. Today we're going to be talking about when you should draft. I feel like we all know people who draft too early. We all know people who draft too late. So we're going to be looking for that sweet spot for when you should draft. We're going to also be talking about the best and the worst positions to draft in fantasy football. I know we're all thinking about the drafts. That's all we can think about for these upcoming weeks is just when are we going to draft and who am I going to draft and when am I going to be reaching for Ashton Genty. But today we're going to be talking about quarterbacks. We're going to be talking about some do and don't drafts. We're going to be doing a positional ranking. And in the preseason, before the fantasy football season does kick off, we're going to be looking at every single position. Like I said, today we're going to be covering quarterbacks. In other episodes, we're going to be covering running backs, receivers, tight ends, all that. Just giving you guys rankings and just helping you guys win your fantasy football championships. And before we get into the actual episode, I know you guys see I have the physical mic today. In the other episode, I had the wireless mic. We're just going to be trying out a lot of different things in these first couple episodes back, seeing what works with me, seeing what's going to get me back in my flow. And I hope that the quality isn't too much of a drop off with the physical mic. I hope it actually improves. That's why I'm trying it out. But enough blabbering. I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and I'll see you guys whenever. Welcome back to the Redzone Report, a fantasy football podcast by Chris Marcano. I am your host, Chris Marcano, and fantasy football, man, the gift that keeps on giving or the gift that just doesn't keep on giving. I feel like at this point, me playing fantasy football, there's no joy in it. You know, when I was first starting out, what was it, 6, 7 years ago? I'm 6, 7. Like starting out 6, 7 years ago. I started in 2018, I believe. I made the championship my first year. I did not win. I was so excited, just waking up every Sunday morning, waiting to see, who's going to pop off this week. I remember my first ever league, I had Todd Gurley, I had Antonio Brown. No, I didn't have Antonio Brown. I had Juju. I had Tyreek Hill. My team was stacked. And it was the year that in the fantasy football championship, Todd Gurley missed it. And that's the reason I lost. I lost by like 10 or 15 points. And I have been in multiple leagues every year since 2018, and I've only won one championship, and that was 2 years ago when CeeDee Lamb had a masterclass of a performance on. I think it was Saturday Night Football. It was a weird game, but I'm chasing that thrill of another fantasy football championship. I know Chris Paul once said, I'm addicted to the finals. I'm addicted to the fantasy football finals, and in a similar way of Chris Paul, I keep fucking losing them because I think I've been a part of like six fantasy football championships, and I've only won one in one of the leagues that I've been like one of the original players in. I've made the championship 3 times and lost every single one, 2 of them to the same person. Fuck you, Dom, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this. And the reason why I want to talk about fantasy football more than just regular football, just because everyone loves talking about regular football, but I really feel like I would consider myself a sweat when it comes to fantasy football, and my insights and just the way I see and talk about fantasy football, I really feel like I can help everyone listening to this podcast. If they really just need another ear on, who should I trade for, who should I draft, who should I this, that, or that. I really feel like I can offer a decent word about fantasy football. So that's why I want to talk about fantasy football. I feel like what the main thing when it comes to drafting in fantasy football is maximizing your value at every position. And I feel like every single year, quarterbacks are the most overdrafted position. We all know that one guy that drafts Mahomes in the second round. We all know that we all know that Cowboys fan that drafts Dak Prescott in the 5th round. And if you want to lose your fantasy football championship, if you want to compete for the toilet bowl, which I know a lot of people will see fantasy football as it's not about winning the entire time, it's losing. If you want to intentionally make your toilet bowl, go ahead and reach and overdraft for quarterbacks. But I've never seen the point in overdrafting for a quarterback. I've always waited for later rounds to draft my quarterbacks to see if I could get any late round value. But before we get into the quarterbacks, let's talk about the drafts. The month is, you guys are going to be hearing this, watching this on the 4th. It is in exactly 1 month. The season starts out on the 4th. And I feel like you might be in a league where you have already drafted. You already drafted a while ago. You might be in a league where you're going to draft September 2nd, September 1st. I don't like drafting too late, because if you draft too late, you're locked into that team for week 1 that you draft. And I know a lot of people don't like to trade or make any changes to their teams before week 1 because they always just want to see how their original team looks. And I feel like if you draft too early, you always have the risk of an injury happening or something. I remember my second year playing fantasy football. I drafted Andrew Luck in like the 8th or the 9th round, and I thought my team was so nasty at the time. And then I remember that was the year that Andrew Luck retired, and then I was like, fuck, because I didn't have any other quarterbacks. I only drafted one, and that was Andrew Luck. I was just planning on picking up someone on the waivers for the bye week. I had the entire year with Derek Carr as my starting quarterback, and he played absolutely terrible in 2019. I remember my team was absolutely god-awful in 2019. I got the second pick. Somehow McCaffrey fell to me, and that was the year where Christian McCaffrey was really demon Christian McCaffrey in fantasy football, where he was averaging like damn near 30 points a game. And I made the playoffs only because of that, and I got my ass handed to me in the first round. But I will never forget the efforts that Christian McCaffrey did for me in that 1 year making the playoffs. And I will always have a special place in my heart for him, and I will always try and draft him if he falls in my hands in leagues. But I feel like the best time to draft in fantasy football is probably a week or 2 weeks before the season starts. Maybe the second to last week or the last week of preseason, or that week before. Just because you have the most up-to-date training camp news and sources. You've seen a lot of preseason action. And you're not locked into that team. If you want to, you can make a trade. You can before you still have a week and a half to make a trade before that first week starts. And it gives you time to make any adjustments, any moves to your team if you want to. And I feel like the risk of injury or something stupid happening to any one of your players is low at that point. And that's why I feel like just drafting at that point not only helps you, but helps everyone else in your league have a better fantasy football experience. Now, where you're drafting can also make or ruin your fantasy football experience. I feel like in 12-team drafts, the best draft position you have, I feel like there's two options. I feel like this year, the best positions to draft at are the first and the second spot, and then pick 7. I'm going to talk about 1 and 2 right now, because at 1 and 2, you get choice of Jamar Chase or Bijan Robinson. At the second spot, you're getting whichever one number 1 doesn't draft, but you're getting one of those two, I feel like those are two of the consensus best players in fantasy football. Or if you feel comfortable drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley at that number 1 spot, totally acceptable. But I feel like at pick 7, you're still getting an elite guy, whether that be Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, still an elite wide receiver, or if you feel comfortable reaching for still a tier 2 running back, which is McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, maybe even Ashton Genty, you could get an elite running back at that spot, and you don't have to wait, and you could still get a lot of value in the middle of the second round with a Brian Thomas potentially if he falls to your hands, a Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, McConkey, Drake London. You still have a lot of value in the second round. You're still getting one of those elite guys in the second round, and you could pair him with whoever your first round pick is, and that'd be a great start to your draft. And then still in the third round, you're getting value like Bowers, Chase Brown, Kyron, maybe even Bucky Irving. If you're drafting at that number 7 spot, you're just finding so much value. If we look Then you're looking in the fourth round, you get value like in Jigba, maybe reach for a quarterback, get a guy like Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels potentially, get Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson in the fourth round. There's so much value whenever you're drafting in the middle of these rounds. You're still getting a high value player in all those rounds. That's why I just feel like the number 7 spot is such a great spot to draft in, just because you have a lot of options to either draft a safer pick, or you can still reach a little bit and still get a lot of value in that number 7 spot. I know I mentioned a couple of quarterbacks. When talking about that third and that fourth round. I feel like in fantasy football, quarterbacks don't matter as much as all the other positions. And what I mean by that is, of course, you have your Elite Four guys. You have Josh Allen, you have Lamar Jackson, in no order, by the way. You have Jalen Hurts, you have Jaden Daniels. But that 5 to 15, there might be like a 2 to 3 point difference. Yeah, a good quarterback can win you your week, but I mean, I feel like a solid quarterback won't lose you a week. And I feel like you can make up for that at other positions, and still at other positions on your team, and still get a solid 17, 18 points per game out of your quarterback position by just waiting a lot of rounds to draft your quarterback. I feel like the best strategy in drafting quarterbacks this year is waiting till rounds 9, waiting till rounds 10 to get a lot of value there, and then getting someone with high upside right before your draft ends. For example, getting a guy like Justin Fields, getting a guy like Dak Prescott as your starter, and then drafting someone like Anthony Richardson or maybe a Cam Ward and having them as your backup just as a high upside guy, because Justin Fields and Dak Prescott are definitely going to get the job done. Don't get me wrong. This year, I love those two guys. And speaking of, I want to talk about 5 quarterbacks who have the most value in drafts, in my opinion, and then 5 quarterbacks who don't have a lot of value in drafts. The reason why I mentioned Justin Fields and Dak Prescott is because those are 2 names that I have in my value picks on who you should be targeting in your drafts. I feel like out of the 5 names that I'm about to mention, if you end up with one of those guys and if you don't end up with Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and you end up with one of these 5 guys that I end up naming, I think you're going to be in pretty good hands. And then I'm going to name another 5 guys who I feel like they're being overdrafted, overvalued. I'm not saying that they're necessarily bad picks. I'm just saying where they're being drafted, I feel like you can get similar, maybe even better production later in your drafts. Just because quarterbacks are just such a toss-up position where it's not really that important after the top 4 guys. The first quarterback I want to mention in the value quarterbacks that you should be targeting in your drafts is Justin Fields. He has averaged over 17 fantasy points a game in years that he's played at least 13 games. Last year, when he was the starting quarterback for the Steelers, he was the quarterback 6 through 6 weeks. And playing in a run-heavy offense with Breece Hall, I feel like that gives him just a lot of upside as a rusher. Him having Garrett Wilson as his number 1 receiver, we know that Garrett Wilson produces and is one of the best receivers in the game. I just feel like if Justin Fields does take a leap as a passer, which it's always been the thing with Justin Fields, will he be able to be a better passer? Will he improve this? If he actually does improve as a passer, which I believe he can, I think a finish around or at the top 5 at the quarterback position I don't feel like it's that out of the world, just because we know what he brings as a rusher. We need to see him air out the football. But I feel like he provides such a late floor later in drafts just because of that rushing upside. The next guy I want to talk about is someone who started off last year horrendous, got benched, and then came back, and it was one of the stories of the year. It's Bryce Young. After being benched, he came back. He started running the ball just a little bit more, using his legs a little bit more. He scored 5 rushing touchdowns, and they just got him Ted McMillan. And I feel like if you're drafting Bryce Young, it's a thing of, do you believe what you saw at the end of the year last year for Bryce Young and think that's sustainable throughout a 17-game pace, which I certainly think it is. Bryce Young was not the same player that he was after he got benched than he was before, in the best way possible. He was, it looks like Alabama Bryce Young throwing the football again. That's what I was watching. That's what I was witnessing. And you're getting him a true number one in Ted McMillan. I think Ted McMillan is he's a great athlete. I think he has potential to be one of the league's best. Now upgrading that from Adam Thielen, I feel like Bryce Young, I feel like if he continues to improve his rushing, which he did at the end of last year, and with the new receiver, I feel like there's potential where he finishes in the top 12. And you're drafting Bryce Young way outside the top 12, and I feel like a top 12 finish is a reality for Bryce Young. I think it is. And then I mentioned this guy before. For my number 3 quarterback, I'm going to talk about Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott has finished in the top 12 quarterback position every season which he plays at least 16 games. And he has been injured a lot. He had that one really bad injury that ended his year early on, like 5 years ago. And then last year, like around the middle of the year, I'm pretty sure is when he went down. But when Dak Prescott is healthy, he's going to air that bitch the fuck out, because we know that the Cowboys are going to be this year in a lot of scenarios where they're losing a lot by a lot and they need to just throw the football. And you gave them a new shiny toy in George Pickens. And fantasy football-wise, this is one of the better scenarios Dak Prescott has been in the past couple seasons, just because you're giving him a true number 2 in George Pickens. And like I said, it's really just a question mark with if he's healthy. And if he is, I think that wherever you're drafting him, you could get a guy that finishes inside the top 10, inside the top 8, inside the top 7. I know Joe Burrow is a guy that's talked about as the best non-rushing quarterback in fantasy football. I feel like Dak Prescott is going to enter that conversation by the end of the fantasy football season, just because that he is the dream. He has the dream scenario for a fantasy football quarterback. The 4th guy I want to talk about is Michael Penix, as a lot of people call him, Michael Penix. He took the Falcons starting job week 14 or 15 was it last year, over Kirk Cousins. And when he was playing just typical gunslinger football. He had a very positive EPA, and he showed a lot of improvement week in and week out. Of course, Bijan Robinson is going to hinder him a little bit, just because we all know the Falcons are a run-heavy team, and they're going to force the ball down Bijan's throat because, it's Bijan Robinson. You still have Drake London on the outside. You still have, if you're a believer, parentheses, Kyle Pitts. I don't believe in Kyle Pitts anymore. But if you do believe in him, that's just more reason to draft Michael Penix. I feel like he has a high QB2 upside. And I feel like even though they run the ball a shit ton with Bijan Robinson, I feel like he can deliver starter-worthy numbers week in and week out, just because he showed so much improvement last year. I really liked what I saw from him through the final couple weeks. I know that they didn't make the playoffs, but they were playing meaningful football games, and he did not let the moment get to him at all, in my opinion. And I think that if the volume is there, then Michael Penix will be a viable quarterback option in fantasy football. And then the last guy I want to talk about is old man frat Matt Stafford. After Cooper Kupp and Puka came back last week, by the way, he was the quarterback 7 from weeks 8 to 14. Weeks 8 to 14, he was the quarterback 7. And he's basically in the same scenario as last year. except that you get an improved receiver at the slot. Instead of Cooper Kupp, you now have Devontae Adams. I'm not discrediting Cooper Kupp in any sort of way, but I just feel like Devontae Adams is an upgrade at this point in time. And I mean, I know he's missed a lot. I think he's missed most of, if not all, of training camp up to this point. And he is old. We might start to question if age is really catching up to Matt Stafford and if he can really sustain all the workload to his body if he's going to get injured and if his production is just going to overall fall off. I think Matt Stafford is the kind of quarterback. I think he's the talent. I think he has the motor, the grit to, even if he isn't 100%, he's going to go out there. He's going to try and play to at least what he can 100% week in and week out. And I think he can support multiple fantasy wide receivers. He's done it before. I think he's going to do it again with Puka and Devontae Adams. And I feel like if Stafford's your backup, or if you're starting Stafford on a week where your quarterback has a bye and you have Puka or Devontae Adams, that's not a bad stack to have on a bye week or on a week where you want to start Stafford with the positive matchup. And I feel like against the right matchups, he should start over a lot of other quarterbacks, and he could win you ball games. He could win you a lot of fantasy ball games. So those are the 5 quarterbacks where I feel like you're getting a lot of value if you draft them at the right spots, of course, because everything I speak about with draft these guys, don't draft these guys, this is just subjective to based on how your fantasy football draft goes. And I know a lot of drafts, quarterbacks are overvalued, others, running backs and receivers. This is just, I'm giving you these tips. It's just subjective to how your fantasy football draft goes. The 5 quarterbacks, I'm not saying don't draft, but I'm not going to draft them. And I feel like wherever you are drafting them, if you are, I feel like you're kind of reaching for value, and you could get other positional value wherever you're drafting these guys. But I'm not saying stay away from them. The first guy I want to talk about is Justin Herbert. I feel like real life football, Justin Herbert, everyone knows the talent that Justin Herbert is. He is one of the game's best. But it's such a bad situation for him in fantasy because the offense he's in just doesn't require him to throw the football all that much. Last year, he only had 2 games. No, he averaged fewer than 30 passing attempts throughout all his games. And he had more games where he threw for either 0 or 1 touchdowns than he did 2 or more. And that's going to lead to performances where you get like 8 or 9 points. And then that's just going to be heartbreaking when you're on Redzone and you're like, oh, I want to see how Justin Herbert's doing. And he scored 8 points and then you're losing by like 3 or 4. And you're like, damn, I should have gotten someone else instead of Justin Herbert. Not calling Justin Herbert a bad football player at all. It's just the situation he's in for fantasy is not ideal. I don't think there's enough passing volume in Los Angeles to be paying that QB 15 price tag that he's going at. I know he has McConkey. There's rumors that Keenan Allen might be signing with them within the week, but I just feel like that's still not enough volume passing wise for me to draft Justin Herbert, and he's not going to run the football a whole lot, so that you're not getting a lot of points running. You're just not going to get a lot of points out of Justin Herbert in a week in and week out basis. The second guy I want to talk about, he was actually one of my quarterbacks in one of my leagues last year that I made the championship in. Baker Mayfield. I feel like everyone last year was like, oh, what a year Baker Mayfield. It was like the QB5, I believe. I traded some depth running back for Baker Mayfield just because the guy that had Baker Mayfield had Jalen Hurts. Didn't need him. He needed some sort of running back depth. I got Baker Mayfield, and he was solid. He was great for me. This is when I traded for him. He had like 35 points championship weekend. I lost because Joe Mixon wants to be worried about beating up women than playing good on the football field. But that's just a conversation for another story. I don't want to get mad on this show. Last year, Baker Mayfield had a 7.3 touchdown percentage, which if you look at his career averages. It's 5%. That's 2.3% higher. And he had a 71.4% completion percentage. I don't It's really hard to see him sustaining that sort of production, especially since Mike Evans is only getting older. Chris Godwin is coming back from an ACL, and Tristan Wirfs is all banged up. It's hard to believe that he can keep playing that efficiently with the football. I'm not saying he's going to be absolute god awful, but it's can he defy that regression and overcome a shaky supporting cast? If you believe in Baker Mayfield, then definitely go on and draft him. But I think Baker Mayfield is good. I think that he can overcome it to an extent. I don't think he's going to return that value that you're drafting him at, but I feel like he's still going to give you good performances week in and week out. You could just get more value later on in drafts. Then I want to talk about Bo Nix, who last year Bo Nix was a very underrated, very good at running the football with his legs, and he got a lot of fantasy points because of it. He provided a safe floor for a lot of fantasy managers, and he was on waivers, and I feel like he saved a lot of people's asses who didn't have quarterbacks. PFF values him as the quarterback 8, but I don't think you should be drafting him at around QB 8. He threw for 25 touchdowns last year, 12 interceptions. He didn't log a 300-yard game till week 11. Week 11. And a lot of his fantasy value did rely on his 90 rushing attempts. It did provide a safe floor, but that's where a lot of the value did come for Bo Nix. And they added J.K. Dobbins. They added R.J. Harvey. Is that going to reduce his running workload? I feel like if it doesn't, then you're getting the value. You're getting the value returned with Bo Nix. But I mean, I feel like if his rushing is cut into, I just feel like you should not draft him, because I feel like him passing. I'm not saying he's a bad passer, but I just feel like it's a big question mark. And then the fourth guy I want to talk about, we've already 3 down, 2 more to go. Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes hasn't finished higher than QB6 since 2022. We all love Pat Mahomes, but I mean, what the Kansas City offense looks like now, it doesn't require him to throw the ball 80 yards down the field every single play. And I feel like his fantasy value has tanked because of it. He ranked 29th in accuracy throw rate last year and 19th in completion percentage over expected. He's still good. He's still Patrick Mahomes, but I feel like now it's a question mark of is Patrick Mahomes still a QB1 in fantasy football? And especially with Rashee Rice, he's going to be missing some games. In my opinion, I think the legal troubles are going to catch up to him this year. Travis Kelce only getting older. I feel like Patrick Mahomes this year has exited the QB1 conversation in terms of fantasy football. I'm not talking about regular football. I'm talking about fantasy football. I think if I'm in a 12-team league, I feel like there's 12 quarterbacks that every other team should be starting. I don't think Patrick Mahomes should be starting in any sort of 12-team league upcoming this year. I feel like he still can be a top 10 quarterback, but I don't think he's top 12. And then the last guy I want to talk about is Caleb Williams. And with Caleb Williams, I'm not saying don't draft him because I don't think he's going to return the value. I just feel like he's way too much of a question mark. He was QB 21 last year in fantasy points per game. He had a lot of great weeks, but then he had a lot of bad weeks. I know that they brought in Ben Johnson. They brought in a brand new coaching staff. And I feel like there's a lot to be excited about with the Bears. But then yet again, it's the Chicago Bears. And if there is one team to fall flat and just to absolutely fail in trying something new with this new coaching staff, it's the Chicago Bears because they've done it before. Why aren't they going to do it again? But I just feel like just with that, Caleb Williams is a question mark. But if Ben Johnson is the truth and Chicago is firing on all cylinders, I feel like where you're drafting him is good value. But he's just a very big question mark for me. I'm definitely going to think twice about drafting Caleb Williams if I do get to that point in my leagues. And now we're going to be doing the top 20 quarterback rankings for this upcoming fantasy season. Basically, I'm just going to go from quarterback 1 to quarterback 20, who I think is going to finish at every position. And there's not much more to explain outside of that. Let's get into the list. I think quarterback 1, he did it last year. I think he's going to do it again. Lamar Jackson, even with Derrick Henry taking a load of carries, a load of rushing yards, and a load of rushing touchdowns, I mean, Lamar Jackson is still going to get his. And on a week in and week out basis, I don't want any other quarterback in fantasy football, minus Lamar Jackson. And then following up, at quarterback 2, who finished at quarterback 2 last year, who won MVP, Josh Allen. He had 12 rushing touchdowns last year. And I remember last year I had him in one of my leagues. I was fighting for a playoff spot. And I had like a 20% chance to win my week. I had to win again to the playoffs. And then my odds boosted. It got to like a 50-50 game because it was the last week of the regular season. And it was the week that basically won Josh Allen the MVP, the week that he exploded versus the Rams. I still ended up losing because I started J.K. Dobbins at running back. That's Sunday Night Football. I didn't really have any better options. But I ended up losing, and I didn't make the playoffs. But that's besides the point. It wasn't Josh Allen's fault. I feel like he's still the safest quarterback off the board in the elite guys. I still feel like it's very justifiable to draft them as the first quarterback, just because he hasn't been worse than the quarterback 2 since 2020. He's always QB2, QB2, QB1, QB2. He's always extremely consistent. You always know that Josh Allen is just going to explode on a week from week to week. And that's why I think he's the second quarterback. Third guy I want to talk about at the number 3 spot, Jaden Daniels. Obviously, just put the world on notice last year. Shout out David Young because he loves him some Jaden Daniels. He led quarterbacks in rushing yards and in scramble rate. David, I went to a Commanders and Cardinals game last year with David, and he told me if Jaden Daniels drops back for longer than 0.3 seconds, he's going to run the football. And that's obviously great for fantasy football because who doesn't love a rushing quarterback in fantasy football? I feel like there's a lot of question marks because people are like, oh, is Terry still going to be there? I think things will be resolved where Terry McLaurin will be around at least this season. And I just feel like you have Deebo Samuel, you're just adding another weapon just to hopefully improve Jaden Daniels' production in fantasy. I think that this Commanders offense and the supporting cast can definitely support him taking a sophomore year leap. At my number 4 and 5 spots, I have Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow, respectively. With Jalen Hurts, he's been a top 6 fantasy quarterback each of the last 3 years because he's a great runner with the football, and obviously he has the tush push to save his ass at week in and week out. A lot of people thought that last year that when Saquon Barkley coming in that the tush push was really going to be affected, but he still got his with the tush push, and Saquon Barkley also ended up getting his too. So it all worked out for everybody. I feel like hopefully the new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia doesn't change too much. I mean, they won the Super Bowl last year. I don't know why they would change a lot. I feel like the offensive coordinator is definitely going to keep Jalen Hurts' rushing volume and his goal line rushing usage. He's definitely going to be near the highest in the league like it always is. And he's always a safe, elite fantasy football quarterback just because of the tush push. And then Joe Burrow. He's always going to be the top non-rushing quarterback. I mean, the Bengals defense didn't get any better. They just paid Jamar. They just paid T. You know what the Bengals are going to do when you play them. They're going to air the fuck out of the football because honestly, they're not really going to have any other chance to win football games if they don't. And Burrow is obviously absurdly talented. He top 3 quarterback in the league in my opinion. I just feel like he's in the same scenario as last year, if not better, because the defense isn't getting any better. I feel like he's going to be at the top of the MVP race again because he's going to have insane numbers. And in fantasy football, it's a game of numbers. So always, Joe Burrow is always a great quarterback to have in fantasy football, especially if you get that stack with Jamar Chase. At my number 6, this might call me crazy, call me insane. I don't really care. I have Justin Fields at number 6. I'm banking on the rushing. I'm banking that the offense is going to look good and Garrett Wilson can support a great passing offense. I believe it. I really do. I think the new coaching staff and the new offensive coordinator is a breath of fresh air for that unit, and Justin Fields is as well, and they get a breath of fresh air from Aaron Rodgers. I feel like if he starts 17 games, I feel like his passing potential is going to be truly unlocked, and it's going to truly be shown, and he's going to have an incredible season, not only football-wise, but fantasy football-wise. At the 7th spot, I know he was in my do not draft, but I'm still going to put Baker Mayfield there. Just the numbers he came off last year, they're incredible. But obviously I feel like he's going to regress. I feel like where you're drafting Baker Mayfield at, you're drafting him at his ceiling. But I don't think his career year is repeatable, but I think that he could still put up very, very good numbers. And I don't think he's going to tumble into the low like QB2 range. I think he can still stay like a low QB1, high QB2. But I don't see an elite year back to back from Baker Mayfield. At QB8, I'm going to have Bo Nix. I don't know if he's worth a top 10 pick when his rushing attempts are definitely going to be eaten into. I don't know how much they're going to be eaten into. I think they will be for sure, but not a whole lot to where him running the football is just completely out of the equation. I think if you're drafting Bo Nix at the 8th spot, I don't think you're ending up with a bad quarterback as the 8th quarterback off the board, excuse me. But I just feel like you could just wait a little bit longer and still get very similar production to Bo Nix. And then following Bo Nix, I already talked about this guy as well, Dak Prescott. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot too much. I already did. We all know how good Dak Prescott is when he's healthy. We all know that the volume that he's going to have passing because the Cowboys are going to be trailing in a lot of football games. And an improved offense and a dream fantasy football scenario has him inside a top 10 quarterback finish, in my opinion. And then at 10, I'm going to have Brock Purdy. He didn't have the best season last year for quarterbacks, but, I mean, I feel like a bounce back is definitely in the cards. I feel like a lot of people are projecting a bounce back from Brock Purdy. I definitely see it happening. In the past, he threw for 4,000 yards and 31 touchdowns. And he had increased rushing attempts last year. He had 4.2 fantasy points per game on the ground last year. I feel like recapturing a little bit of that 2023 magic and that 2023 efficiency and a little bit of improved rushing can help Brock Purdy finish top 10 as a top 10 quarterback in fantasy football next year. At 11, I'm going to go with Kyler Murray. I feel like the past couple seasons in fantasy with Kyler Murray, he's always been looked at as, this elite guy that you can pick up late in drafts because he's being overlooked. He's one of the best running quarterbacks in the game, and he definitely is. But, I mean, as a Cardinals fan, is Kyler Murray good at football is the question that I'm wondering. Obviously, all jokes with that partially because he always falls off whenever it's a big game or into the second half of the year. He always falls off. And I don't know if you want to draft a quarterback in fantasy football who you don't know if he's going to be good for you for half of the season, and that half of the season is the most important half of the season because it's the second half of the season. That's where championships are won. That's where championships are lost. That's where toilet bowls are decided. I don't know if you want to draft a guy who's just gonna be good and then who's just gonna flat out suck. Uh, of course you have the revamped supporting cast we saw from last year. You have Marv, who's going to hopefully have a great second sophomore year. You have Trey McBride, who's one of the best tight ends in football. You have James Conner, who's just going to support an elite running game. But I know he used to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. I'm starting to question if he's going to crack the top 10 in fantasy quarterbacks. For me, he doesn't at this point. That's why I have him at 11. But Kyler Murray, I feel like always a big question mark. And then at the 12th spot, I'm going to have Caleb Williams. A lot of people are calling Caleb Williams the best out of the non-obvious quarterbacks. And if you do believe that he is going to take a step up this sophomore year, and you do believe in Ben Johnson, you do believe what they're having, I feel like him going off the board at QB12 is you're gonna get returned with some great value there if you do believe in the Bears, and that's just if you do believe. He did have that rocky rookie year, but if you're drafting Caleb in fantasy, I feel like you're believing that he can finish within that top 10 of fantasy quarterbacks, and I feel like he definitely can. I also feel like with Rome Odunze hopefully taking a step up, with DJ Moore still being an elite option, I feel like, and with them bringing in Luther Burden, I feel like I said, if you do believe in the Bears, he can finish as a league winning quarterback. And then at 13 is where I'm going to have Patrick Mahomes. I know I said I don't think he should be starting in any sort of 12-team league, but I mean, if one of those 12 guys are out or have the bye week, I feel like Patrick Mahomes is the next guy up who's going to step into that top 12. Just because, it's still Patrick Mahomes. He hasn't been good for fantasy football these past couple of years, but it's still he's dropped off in air yards per attempt. It's definitely concerning. Excuse me. I would draft Patrick Mahomes if he was still available and there was 14 other quarterbacks taken off the board. Then that's when I would personally justify drafting Patrick Mahomes. But that's just my opinion. You guys, if you guys have won more fantasy football championship than me, you might know better. I don't know. At 14, I have Jared Goff. I feel like he was around that last year. He's come off 3 straight 4,400-yard seasons and 2 years with at least 30 touchdowns. He still has that electric offense with Gibbs, with Montgomery, hopefully fully healthy, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with J-Mo, with Laporta. It's just a question mark of will this production be sustained with no Ben Johnson? A lot of people are calling Jared Goff Ben Johnson merchant, but I mean, he was in the Super Bowl back in 2019, I believe, with the Rams. He was the number 1 quarterback in the 2017 draft, I think it was, if I'm right. He was the number 1 pick for a reason. He's still uber talented, but it's just a question mark of is he going to look the same without Ben Johnson. I think he's still going to look good. I don't think he's going to look as sharp as he did last year, though. And then at number 15, I'm going to have Drake May. I feel like there's heavy rushing upside with Drake May, and if you had Drake May as your second backup quarterback, I feel like that's a great backup quarterback to have in fantasy. He's a great runner. He has a new offense, so I feel like he has a high ceiling because they're bringing in Vrabel. They brought in Stephon Diggs. He has a weapon on the outside now. And I feel like if you believe in Drake May's development and you do believe in the improved weapons and the new coaching staff, I feel like this could really be a breakout in year 2 for Drake May, fantasy football wise. And I feel like QB 15, yeah, that's a decent spot for him. I feel like he could finish near the top 10. I feel like that's within the cards for Drake May. And then at 16, I'm going to have C.J. Stroud. He had a great rookie year, and then last year, I feel like everyone on the Texans was injured, and it led to him taking a fall off in in the stats and numbers wise. Obviously, I mean, they still succeeded. They still made the playoffs. They still won their wild card game. But I mean, statistically, C.J. Stroud wasn't as brilliant as he was last year than he was on his rookie year. But I feel like at the QB 16 spot for C.J. Stroud, that's a good spot for C.J. Stroud. I mean, a lot of people were putting him in the top 5 overall quarterback rankings going into last season. And I feel like, I mean, he did have a sophomore slump. I feel like if you could put that behind him, and I feel like you can elevate the Texans' offense once again, have them as one of the better units in the league, and him putting up good numbers again. I feel like that could definitely happen with C.J. Stroud. At 17, I'm going to have Jordan Love. He 2 years ago, he had a great year, and then last year he missed some time. And then he was throwing a touchdown, and then the next play, he was just throwing a pick. Jordan Love might be playing button roulette in every football game he plays. By the way, if you guys don't know what button roulette is, this is a PlayStation controller. There's buttons here. When you have no idea, when you're playing Madden or 2K or any sports game in general, and you're passing the ball to somebody and you don't know what button you need to press, and you just randomly press the button, that's playing button roulette. And you just hope that the ball ends up in the guy you're trying to throw it to. You just hope it ends up in their hands. And a lot of the time it doesn't, but I mean, that's why it's called button roulette. I feel like Jordan Love plays button roulette in real life with real football. But I feel like if he could cut down the turnovers, he could be a viable fantasy football option. But if he doesn't, I really don't see that happening. He just stays at a backup guy who you question every so often, depending on the matchup or depending on the bye week, if you should start him or not. And at 18, I'm going to have Justin Herbert. Like I said, never questioning the talent with Justin Herbert. I'm just questioning the volume because it was a problem last year, and it's just looking like the Chargers are going to run the ball even more than they did last year. I already talked about Justin Herbert. I'm not going to talk about him too much. At 19, I have Trevor Lawrence. They added Travis Hunter in the offseason. I feel like he could be a solid starter, but he lacks that elite rushing upside that a lot of other top guys have, and I feel like the volume sometimes is a question mark with Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, you brought in Travis Hunter, but is that enough to move the needle fantasy-wise for Trevor Lawrence? I don't know if it is this year. Maybe in the future. I don't think it's going to happen this year, though. And then at 20, I'm going to have J.J. McCarthy. I only have him at 20 just because I haven't seen him play a snap of real NFL football. And I know that Kevin O'Connell and that coaching staff is just, it's a heaven for quarterbacks, and I'm not doubting them. The only reason I have him at 20 is just because he's unproven. But I feel like the sky's the limit fantasy-wise for J.J. McCarthy if he can be who the Vikings believe he can be, which is a guy who supports Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison with elite volume. And I feel like if you draft J.J. McCarthy as just a high upside guy on your bench, not having him start, but just having him just in case he becomes he explodes and in case he becomes a top 10 guy, and that guy you drafted in the first round doesn't pan out, I feel like he could be a good option to draft as your backup, and you're not losing a lot by drafting him at as the 20th quarterback taken off the board, but there is a lot to gain. Quarterbacks. If you want one thing to be taken away from in this episode, please, for the love of God, do not overdraft quarterbacks because you might lose your fantasy football league because of it. It's happened to so many people I've played with fantasy football. It's happened to so many people that I know that have told me about it. Never overdraft a quarterback in fantasy football. I'll focus on getting elite running. Focus on shoring up your wide receiver 1 and 2. Focus on getting an elite running back and then finding running back value in the 5th and 6th round as your running back 2. Focus on getting that positional advantage at tight end over everyone else in your league. But just don't draft a quarterback. Thank you guys for listening to this first episode of this fantasy football podcast. I feel like the reason I'm making this, if I feel like I got something to prove, I feel like I have a chip on my shoulder from all these other leagues that I've lost and then lost and then lost. And like I said, countless fantasy football leagues, been playing since 2018, and I have one championship to my name. And I feel like that championship was kind of fraudulent because we had like 2 or 3 people just stop playing in the middle of the season. I know you get that a lot in fantasy football, but it didn't feel right for me. And hopefully you guys embark on me in this journey, get doing my best research, doing my best ability to help not only you guys but myself reach fantasy football stardom, which is a championship, obviously. And if you trust me, if you believe me, if you put even just a little bit of belief in me, I feel like I'll help you out in the long run. And if you're in any of my leagues and you're listening to this, just watch out. That's all I gotta say. Watch out. I said, I feel like I have a chip on my shoulder, and I'm gonna take it on each and every single one of you guys. Hopefully you guys will be hearing from me on Wednesday. Hopefully we get another baseball episode out. And then hopefully I start uploading some videos on YouTube, whether that be just ranking stuff, talking about stuff, whatever. Just start getting active on that side of things. But that's it and everything for me. Just let me know if you guys want to hear anything specific on the next episode. And thank you guys so much for all the support that I had on the first episode. Even though it wasn't a lot, the support that I did get, it made recording this episode, and hopefully it's going to make recording every single one of these next episodes just easier and easier and easier. And you guys definitely are making it easier. I had people reposting my stuff, people reaching out, and it warmed up my heart. It really did. And I appreciate everyone listening to this, everybody sending me words, just being there for me. You guys do not know how much it means. But enough of me blabbering about my appreciation to you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of whatever, and I'll catch you guys whenever.